Hey everyone. Tonight, we embark on a journey unlike anything you've ever experienced. A long night filled with red dust, the neighing of horses, the smell of sun-scorched leather, and unfriendly eyes peering from behind saloon windows. You don't know why you're here, but the sneakers on your feet are sinking into the hot sands of the Wild West. You might think you've seen enough cowboy movies to survive, but you'd be wrong. Here, the rules are nothing like what you've learned in books or seen on screen. There's no friendly sheriff, no dramatic soundtrack for a gunfight, and definitely no respawning in the next level after you die. So, before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments, so I know I'm not the only one up late, navigating the midnight sea of information. Now, turn off the lights, maybe switch on a fan for some white noise, and let's step into tonight's journey together. You wake up with the sun high in the sky and a thick layer of dust covering your backpack, your hair, and even your eyebrows. There's no one around you, except for a small town in the distance, peeking out from behind red-earthed hills. It looks like a crude sketch on a piece of paper that's been folded into quarters and tossed under a bus seat. You trudge forward, your feet aching as if they've been minced. But what's worse is the first look you get upon arrival. A man in a wide-brimmed hat, his eyes narrowed either from the sun or from his dislike of your face, whistles softly as you pass. Immediately, another man gets up from a wooden bench outside the saloon, spits on the ground, and steps inside. You're not sure what kind of signal that was, but your gut tells you no one here likes strangers, especially not strangers wearing a cartoon t-shirt. This town has no name, or if it did, the sign was shot to pieces long ago. Old brickwork, wooden window frames rattling in the dry wind, and a hand-painted wooden sign. Whiskey 10 cents sways silently, like a lazy noose. You step into the saloon, where everything is bathed in a dull yellow light and smells of old leather. The sound of a wooden chair scraping across the floor reminds you of a scene from some movie. The only difference is, this time, you're the main character, and there's no stunt double. The bartender doesn't smile or ask what you want. She slams a glass of something on the table before you can speak, and you drink it because you'd rather not lose face or your life. It tastes like gasoline mixed with honey, sweet, bitter, burning your throat, and full of danger. A man sitting nearby tilts his head. "Lost, are you, friend?" You stammer, I think this is just a dream." He laughs, but there's no warmth in it. "Ain't no dreams here, friend. Only graves." You nod, making a mental note. It's the first time you've heard a piece of philosophy delivered in the voice of a man who's probably buried a few folks for looking at him the wrong way. The locals start asking you strange questions. "Where you from? They got a lot of guns there? You know how to ride a horse? And the last one, you run into snakes often?" You let out a weak laugh, then realize no one else is laughing. The saloon falls silent, as if an invisible shot was just fired. Outside, the wind whips through the red dust, carrying a poster that reads, "Wanted, dead or alive," and the face on it looks an awful lot like yours. You swallow hard, realizing the picture on the poster is a little off, but close enough for someone to try their luck. A voice rings out from behind you, looks mighty close. You turn to see a man in a long duster coat, his hand resting on the pistol hanging at his hip. The whole saloon seems to hold its breath. You wish you hadn't posted that selfie yesterday. You force a smile. It's the I'm just a tourist smile you've used to get away from aggressive touts at the Mien Tay bus station in Saigon. But this isn't a bus station. This is a town where one mistimed smile could be the signal to start a gunfight. The man in the duster takes another step, his eyes fixed on you as if he's calculating the value of every square inch of skin on your face. His fingers tapped a light rhythm on the butt of his gun, a deadly tune waiting for its cue. "I reckon you don't know the rules in this town, do you?" he said, his voice as steady as sand slipping through death's own hourglass. You swallowed, trying to hide the tremor in your hands. Rules? What rules? No smiling, no wearing a t-shirt with a dancing chicken on it? I'm just passing through, you said, and in that same moment, you extended your hand for a handshake. The entire saloon went deathly quiet. A handshake. "Here?" The man looked down at your outstretched hand, then burst out laughing. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh a man gives when he thinks you've just mistaken a bear trap for a travel pillow. "You just insulted him," another man grunted, getting to his feet. "A handshake here, that's a challenge, sweetheart." You pulled your hand back, but it was too late. The man in the duster raised his arms, not to surrender, but to shrug off his coat. Beneath the dusty fabric was a shotgun slung diagonally across his chest and a tattoo of a skull that seemed to be sweating in the heat. You stumbled backward, bumping into another table. The man sitting there silently pushed his chair back and pulled a knife from his boot. It felt like you'd stumbled into the corporate welcome party from hell, except instead of a name tag, you were wearing an invisible tombstone. "If I win," the duster-clad man said, "I take your shoes, your backpack, and your life, in that order, if you don't mind." You wanted to say, "I don't even know the name of this town," but all you could manage was, "Can I apologize?" "Nope, but you can catch this." He punched you square in the face. The blow wasn't as hard as you expected, or maybe adrenaline had numbed the pain. You hit the floor, your hands landing on old tiles caked with dust and dried blood. No one in the saloon intervened. This was clearly a local tradition. You scrambled to your feet, and your first instinct was to punch back. And strangely, it connected. The big man staggered back, clutching his stomach, his eyes wide with shock. The saloon went silent. A woman's voice cut through the stillness. He hit him back. Another voice chimed in. First time someone's done that in 10 years. You blinked, blood dripping from your nose, your head ringing. But a strange feeling was rising inside you. Pride. The other man straightened up. This time he didn't reach for his gun. He walked over, picked up the hat you'd dropped, and handed it to you. Then he offered his hand. "Nice one, kid. You passed the test. Name's Clay." You shook his hand the right way, this time. The saloon broke into scattered applause. Someone refilled your glass. The bartender gave you a slight nod. For the first time in your life, you felt accepted, all thanks to a punch to the gut. Clay sat down at your table and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. To survive in this West, you need 3 things: guts, luck, and a list. A list? Who'll help you? Who'll kill you? And who isn't sure yet? This town's got 'em all. I can help you with the last part. And remember, he leaned in, never trust a man wearing a duster with no dust on his shoulders. Means he's been standing still too long, usually behind a bush, waiting for someone like you to pass by. You took a sip of the drink. It didn't taste as bad this time, maybe because the blood in your mouth made it saltier. You nodded. trying to commit his words to memory. "You know why I didn't just shoot you?" Clay asked. You shook your head. "Because you look, well, you look like someone who's never shot a man. Round here, that's strange and dangerous." You glanced around the room at the men with eyes that had seen more death than sunrises, at the women who smiled with eyes that never truly did. And then there was you, the outsider, wearing sneakers in a nightmare shaped like the Promised Land. Clay stood up, adjusting his gun belt. "Get some rest. Tomorrow you learn to find water. And not for fun. You don't, you'll end up like the last one." You were about to ask who the last one was, but he was already gone. A man at the bar shrugged. "We get one of you 'bout every week. Most don't leave." You swallowed, not from fear this time, but because your mouth was bone dry. Suddenly, you understood. Water was life. You looked at the glass of whiskey, thought about the punch, and Clay's words. That night you slept with your shoes on, because here, nothing could be trusted. Even sleep itself could be stolen. You wake up in a rickety wooden room at the inn. The wind whistles through the cracks in the walls, carrying the smell of hot sand and horse manure. Your throat is so dry that swallowing your own saliva makes a sound like a twig snapping. And then it hits you like an electric shock. You have no water. You search your backpack. An empty plastic bottle, as flat as your faith in Google Maps in a place like this. There's no tap, no kettle, not even a sink, just a wooden basin with a dry bottom and a damp rag you don't dare smell. You step outside. The sun beats down on your forehead like a second punch from Clay. Sand swirls around your ankles. The air is as dry as a cicada's husk, and your throat begins to protest with a parched hiccup. A Wild West thirst is unlike any you've known. It arrives as if it never plans to leave. You head to the saloon where Clay was yesterday. He's not there, but a woman is wiping down a table. You ask, "Excuse me, do you have any water here?" She looks at you as if you just asked for the Wi-Fi password. "Sure do," she replies. 5 cents. A small glass. 8 if you want it cold. You exhale, almost on the verge of tears. "Cold?" She nods. "I'll blow on it." You pay, and true to her word, the water is warm and smells faintly of rotting wood. But you drink it, as if you're pouring your own soul back into your body. A man sitting nearby watches you with a look of pity. "Newcomer, huh?" You nod. "First thing you learn here is that water is gold, even if it's dirty, got gizzards in it, or scooped from the bottom of a haunted well behind the church. It's still gold." You ask, "Is there anywhere to get free water?" "Sure, but you gotta dig for it, beg for it, fight for it, or bargain for it." "That sounds like making love to death." He laughs. "Close enough. Dying for water is common round here. Some folks have drowned in dry wells, reaching too deep. Just as you're about to ask more, a child runs past, clutching a soggy bundle and shouting, "I got 2 sips of water for a handful of dried fish bones." You watch the boy give the water pouch to a ragged old woman, who in turn hands him a single sandal. You turn to the old man. "What's the currency here?" "Anything that has value to someone else." "You got a lighter?" You shake your head. "Then false teeth, a paring knife, anything that's not from here can be traded for water." You feel like you're in a real-life survival game. But there's no health bar, no thirst meter, only the raw, deadly reality of dehydration. Clay appears from behind the saloon, his hair a mess, and his shirt caked with dirt. He tosses you a tightly sealed canteen. Take it. It's well water from this morning. Tastes a bit like fish, but it's drinkable. You drink without a word. When you're done, Clay says, tomorrow morning I'm taking you to the canyon ridge. There's a small rock crevice with an underground stream. But if you see anyone else getting water, don't look them in the eye. Act like you don't see them. Why? Because out here a glance can be a declaration of war. You look around. Everyone is silent, subtly observing one another. A world where your old plastic water bottle, once trash, could now be salvation. You ask Clay, has anyone ever tried to build a water system here? He shrugs. Yep. Fella named Jeremiah built 2 aqueducts. Got poisoned a day later. His bones are still under one of them. Makes for a great filter. You shudder, remembering how you used to casually leave a half-full glass of water, how you'd let the tap run while brushing your teeth. Now, you'd kill for that half glass. You ask, is there any way to store water? Clay nods. Some dig holes and bury clay pots to catch the night dew. Others collect old bottles and hang them under thatched roofs. One old woman used to lick the condensation off the church walls every morning. Is she still alive? Nope. Someone pushed her off the roof, fighting over the dew. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. Instead, you just make a mental note. Tomorrow, you'll find a place to dig a hole and hide it well. You leave the saloon with 2 new lessons. Water is life, and a look can kill. As dawn breaks, sunlight sweeps across the town like a red-hot blade. You bolt upright, a dull ache in your head, your lips as dry and cracked as a drought-stricken riverbed. But something is worse than the thirst. Your shoes. You look down at your feet. The right sneaker, the one you bought in an online buy one, get a delusion for free sale, has split open at the toe, revealing your big toe as if it's giving the world the middle finger. The sole is ragged, the rubber torn like a dried banana peel, and the heel is gone. You step onto the floor, and the first sensation is sand pricking your heel like 100 hot needles. You let out a soft groan, but no one cares. In the Wild West, a groan has no trade value. Clay enters the room, kicking the door open with the heel of his boot. He looks at you as if assessing a piece of broken pottery. You need shoes. Now. You nod, lifting your left foot. The sole falls off like a slice of cheese from a cold pizza. Where can I get shoes? Clay shrugs. The graveyard. Or the store. The losers choose for you. You mean take shoes from the dead? They ain't using 'em, are they? You hesitate, but then Clay shoves a crumpled piece of paper into your hand. Trade shoes for services. No questions, no stories, no returns. Signed, G.T. the Bootwright. You follow the map toward the outskirts of town, where the houses are just charred wooden frames and stray dogs howl like a funeral choir. A shack appears, its roof patched with pot lids and rusty tin cans. A sign hangs from it. Enter, if you dare. You knock. A shrill voice calls out, "Come in if your feet are still alive." You step inside and realize this isn't a store, it's a bizarre museum. Shoes from every era hang from the ceiling, from dress shoes and army boots to faded plastic sandals. A mixed smell of leather, mold, and possibly old flesh assaults your nostrils. G.T., an old woman with hair like a bird's nest, emerges, a measuring tape in her hand. She flicks it across your foot. What do you want? Soft, good grip, or just plain deadly looking? I want to survive. The escape model. An upgrade from the miner's boot and the working girl's heel. Very durable, very ugly. She pulls out a bulky pair of boots made from some unidentifiable hide, the soles cut from old tires and the laces made of catgut, she says. You hope she's kidding. What's the trade? You empty your pockets. A few polymer banknotes, a Doraemon keychain, and a 2-week-old mint candy. She picks the candy. Rare, sweet, good for luring children. You shudder and don't dare ask any more questions. You put on the shoes. They're heavy, but comfortable. The sole feels as solid on the sand as it would on a paved schoolyard at 6 a.m. You say thanks and head for the door. You know why I make shoes? She calls after you. You turn back, because the feet are the only things that touch the ground, and the ground ain't friendly. It scrapes, it cuts, it swallows. If you think you can survive here barefoot, you deserve to die. You nod, for the first time feeling grateful for the ugliest pair of shoes on the planet. When you get back to town, Clay glances at your feet. Not bad. But remember, don't run when you're chased. Runnin' is for bleedin'. Walkin' is for livin'. Why? Because folks in the West never chase a runnin' man. They just shoot. You nod, shuddering. On this road, every step is a compromise with the sand, the rocks, and yourself. That night, you take off the shoes, wipe them clean, and place them under your pillow as if daring anyone who wants them to kill you first. And you dream of shoes. A dream where you lose both your feet and have to crawl on the hot, sharp red rock. You wake up clutching your ankles, thanking God the shoes are still there. You think, yesterday I learned to survive with water, today with shoes. What about tomorrow? But you don't have to wait. The question is answered sooner than you think. As you walk down the town's main street, practicing the local gait slow, no swinging arms, and never looking at anyone for more than 3 seconds, a hand lands on your shoulder, not squeezing, not pulling, just resting there. You turn around and come face to face with a massive man, his beard so thick you could probably raise a family of mice in it. He wears a short leather jacket, a black hat, and a belt adorned with a chain of handcuffs, a dagger, and, of course, a gun. He doesn't say hello. He says, "You seen a fella named Mike Joss pass through here?" You blink. "Mike who?" "About your height. Looks a little dumber." I'm new here." He nods. "Good, then you can help me." Before you can object, he shoves a piece of paper as thin as dried goatskin into your hand. Wanted, Mike Joss, $100 alive, $50 dead, plus a pair of crocodile skin boots. You swallow. It's the first time in your life you've seen a price tag and a death sentence on the same piece of paper. "I'm Eddie," he says, "bounty hunter. I don't kill for fun, only for the contract. But sometimes fun is a valid reason too. I'm not good at catching people," Eddie laughs. "Then learn. Mike's hiding somewhere round town." He picked the mayor's pocket and cursed at his daughter's wedding. "I'm busy with another crew, so I need bait." "Bait?" "That's right. Just walk around. Pretend to be lost. If Mike sees you, he'll make a move, and when he does, I'll make my move on him, or you do. The faster you are, the longer you live." You look at the poster, then at his face. Not a hint of a joke. "If I do this, what do I get? A bottle of water, and my respect. And if I fail, an unmarked hole behind the chapel." You walk away, your heart pounding. The town is no longer just hot sand. It's a chessboard, and you're the pawn that's just been pushed to the front line. You sit on the wooden bench outside the saloon, pretending to watch the birds. You observe everyone who passes, who looks scared, who avoids eye contact. A small man walks by, blue shirt, black hat pulled low, muttering to himself. You follow him, not too close, not too far. He turns into a narrow alley between two rickety houses. You follow. Following me, you jump. Mike? I know, I'm just going the same way. Same way, same build, same intention to die. He pulls out a knife faster than you thought possible. You remember Clay's words, don't run. You take a step closer. Mike flinches, surprised. You're not scared. You speak softly. I don't know how to fight, but I have something you need. Mike pauses. What? A rumor. I heard a wagon train is coming from the north with clean water. If I hold you here for 5 minutes, you miss your chance. If you leave this alley now, I'll forget your face. Mike stares at you for a long moment, then nods. That fella Eddie sent you to be bait, didn't he? You say nothing. Well, tell him he's out of luck this time. I'm gone, and you stay alive. Mike disappears through a wooden wall like a ghost. You breathe a sigh of relief. When you turn around, Eddie is standing at the end of the alley. Not happy, not angry. You let him get away. I kept my life. Eddie walks over and tosses you a bottle of water. Fair enough. But next time you make a deal, be clear. I don't like being cut out, you nod. That bottle of water is worth more than any victory. That night, you write in your notebook, not everyone with a gun is dangerous, but the one with nothing to lose is always the most terrifying. You thought that after escaping Mike Joss and getting a cold bottle of water from Eddie, life would grant you a temporary vacation pass. But no, the West has no concept of rewarding merit. It only has one rule: don't die tonight, so you can worry about tomorrow. You drag your feet back to the inn, or rather a wooden house with a creaky door, the smell of damp mold and floorboards that groan every time you breathe too hard. You open the door to your dark, stuffy room and discover something new. The room is no longer yours alone. A stranger is lying on your bed. No, 2 strangers. A couple, their leathery skin wrinkled like a river map, sleeping nestled against each other like 2 pieces of rotten wood held together by exhaustion. Beside them is a dog or something that was once a dog staring at you with a go-on. I dare you to move me look. You go back downstairs to the front desk. There are people in my room, you tell the proprietress. That's right. There's a wedding today. Folks from out of town came back, not enough rooms. Everyone gets a corner. Don't make a fuss. You bite back the question. So what exactly did I pay for? Because you still enjoy living. So you return to the room, tiptoeing like a cat with a sore paw, and choose to sleep under the bed. It's cramped, dusty, and smells like the mop water from 1911 has never been changed. You try to sleep, but the old man snoring above you creates a steady drumbeat, accompanied by his wife's teeth grinding, making you feel like you're under the floor of a bar about to erupt in a brawl. And just as you start to drift off, a small click echoes in the room. You open your eyes. The window is opening. Not the wind, not a ghost. A person, a shadow slips through. You hold your breath. Someone is sneaking in. You crawl out from under the bed, careful not to disturb your temporary family, and creep to the corner of the room. A man in a hood, holding a sack, is rummaging through your backpack. "Hey!" you whisper shout. He jumps, spins around, and pulls a knife. You raise your hands, which are holding nothing but a sock and a stomachache pill. He glances at your meager possessions. What's this? He pulls out a small metal object. The lighter. You'd forgotten it had rolled into a corner of your pack. He looks at you, his eyes gleaming. This could buy me a hot dinner, you know. I know, but it's mine. He hesitates. Then a growl from the dog. Just one sound, but it's like a signal. The man scrambles out the window and disappears. You stand there, panting. A moment later, the old woman on the bed opens her eyes. Who was that? Just the wind. Be careful of the wind, she murmurs. Around here it knows how to pick locks. The next morning you go to see Clay. Someone snuck into my room last night and took my lighter. He nods. Glad you're still alive. It's a common occurrence. The nights are the worst here. Nobody sleeps soundly. People lock their doors to keep out people, not wild animals. Around here, people are the wild animals. You sit down. I want a lock. A strong one. Is there a place that sells them? Clay laughs. There is. An old man named Marius. He's a locksmith, but he specializes in fixing coffins. What does that mean? He locks everything. Lids on caskets, money boxes, ammo crates, and even pie safes. You go to Marius's house, a small cottage filled with the smell of paint, wood, and incense. Marius looks at you like a fortune teller sizing up a potential client. A lock for what room? The kind that no one can get into, not even me. Possible, but expensive. What do you have of value to trade? You think for a moment, then hand him the survival journal you've been writing since day one. Every line, every note. Marius looks at it, then nods. This has heart. I like it. A deal. You return to the inn, install the lock, and test it 3 times. It's solid. That night, for the first time, you sleep peacefully, even though it's on the floor next to a dog dreaming of human bones. And in your sleep, you dream of sleeping alone. You wake up with a neck as stiff as a wooden plank and a back that feels like 2 carpenters took turns hammering nails into it all night. However, the first thing on your mind isn't the terrible sleep, but breakfast. You head downstairs to the inn's small kitchen, where a smell is rising from a cast-iron pot as black as the ancestor of coffee. A cook with hair as white as a foggy sky is stirring something thick that makes a plop-plop sound. Is there anything to eat? You ask. Without looking at you, she just jerks her chin toward a table. Help yourself. You walk over and find a pot containing a mixture of something between black beans, some colored bits that look like beef jerky, and what appears to be gravel. Next to it is a plate of bread as dry as old wall plaster. You quietly scoop a spoonful, blow on it, and take a taste. Your teeth protest. It's as hard as a rock, as salty as a miner's tears, and has a smell reminiscent of burnt sand. You turn to the cook. Is there anything else? Yes, don't eat. What do you mean? What you're eating is the only thing left. You sit down, trying to chew as if your teeth are a rental property. Beside you, a man dressed as a blacksmith is gnawing on a piece of bread without blinking, as if biting an old enemy. Good, ain't it? He asks, just to break the suffocating silence. He nods to himself. More beans this season than last, fewer worms, but still not as good as the beans of 2031. That year, the worms killed people, and the beans saved them. You don't ask any more questions, not wanting to open a philosophical discussion about beans and death. A young woman at a nearby table hands you a small vial. Put this in. It's easier to eat. You thank her and pour a few drops into your bean concoction. The spiciness is so intense your eyes fly open as if you've reached enlightenment. You cough violently. She laughs. Snake pepper, made from the venom of a red-tailed viper mixed with lime juice and burnt cactus oil. It burns your guts, but kills all the bacteria and bad memories. Your tongue goes numb. But she's right, it is easier to eat. In the same way, an electric shock might help you wake up. What's your name? You ask her. My name doesn't matter. But if you need a breakfast that doesn't involve chewing rocks, go to the old train station. There's a Frenchman there who makes soup out of something. The origin is unclear, but there are no rocks in it. You nod. She leaves, leaving behind a mint candy on the table. A thank you gift, perhaps, or a warning. You return to your table. Another man asks, "You know how to cook? I know how to boil water." Then you're already a chef. You manage a weak smile. He continues, "If you can cook something edible without breaking a tooth, I'll pay you in medicine, for real. 1 pill for diarrhea and 2 for bruises." You ponder this. This is not a place for long-term survival if you don't learn to cook. So you go to Clay. "I need a kitchen and ingredients. There's a stove behind the saloon. For ingredients, go to the open-air market. But remember, don't bargain too much." Saying that's too expensive is an invitation for a knife. You go to the market, where they sell everything from dried fish to rope, from cornbread to human fingernails. Whether real or symbolic is unclear. You manage to buy some cornmeal, an onion that hasn't sprouted yet, and a small packet of something that looks like dried minced meat. That night, you cook a porridge of hope. Water simmered with onion, shredded dried meat, mixed with cornmeal, and seasoned with snake pepper and a vague sense of faith. A fragrant aroma wafts out, and you notice the entire inn goes silent for 3 seconds. A record. The first person to ask for a bowl is the inn's proprietress. The second is the blacksmith, after breaking his lower molar on a rock. The third is the dog. You think you've just invented the concept of just good enough not to die. That night, you sleep through the old man's bull-like snores. But this time, your stomach is full and sleep comes like an old friend who isn't here to collect a debt. The next morning, Clay knocks on your door with a rock. Get up. Today, I'm teaching you something important. What? How to ride a horse. You sit bolt upright with the look of someone who just heard they won the lottery. The military draft lottery. I've never ridden a horse. Even better. Fewer illusions, fewer broken bones. You follow him to the stables behind the saloon, where muscular creatures weighing a ton are chewing hay as if it had insulted their mothers. A black horse, its coat glossy, glares at you like a homeroom teacher who just found out you didn't do your homework. This is Scar. He hates newcomers, especially those wearing neon green shoes. You look down at your feet. Your new Escape model boots are indeed green, and very bright. "Go on, get up there," Clay urges. You look at the saddle high, tilted, and unfriendly. You put your foot in the stirrup, push off hard, and fly backward. The horse does nothing. It just snorts, as if in mockery. Clay laughs. "It's fine. Everyone does that the first time, except the dead. They complain less. You try again. This time, you make it. You sit on the horse's back, spine as straight as an elementary school student during the flag ceremony, hands gripping the reins for dear life. "Balance," Clay instructs. "Don't squeeze your legs too tight. He'll think you want to race. Don't be too loose. He'll think you're a sack of potatoes." You nod. Let's just walk around the yard. You kick your foot lightly. The horse shakes its head. You kick harder. It doesn't move an inch. Clay steps up and whispers something in the horse's ear. It bolts. You scream. The horse shoots forward like an arrow, tearing through the wind, while you nearly shatter your tailbone. Your body leaves the saddle not by choice, but by centrifugal force. You fly a short distance and land on your rear in perfect accordance with the laws of gravity. Nice, Clay says. Now try again. But this time, don't tense up. Riding a horse is a compromise, not a victory. You look at the horse, it looks at you. An unspoken agreement passes between you. I won't buck if you don't fall. You get back on more gently this time. It feels different. You let your body move with its rhythm, swaying but not getting thrown. Clay nods. There you go. A horse isn't a vehicle, it's a partner. Just like everything else out here. It can kill you unless you learn how to talk to it. You ride around the yard. Each lap a lesson. Sit straight. Don't look down. Keep your back relaxed. Hold the reins just right. You ask Clay, does a horse ever betray its rider? Sometimes the rider betrays it first. Do they understand human speech? They understand emotion. Better than humans do. You nod. For the first time on this journey, you feel in control of something. Even if it's just an animal, it has accepted you. You dismount and stroke its mane. Clay says, now you can leave town. But if you do, you'll die on the second hill because you don't know the direction of the wind, which snakes bite, or who'll shoot you from behind a bush. So what do? Keep learning. Tomorrow, you'll set up camp, then hunt, then negotiate. You think you're surviving? Not yet. This is just a tutorial. You smile faintly and sit down at the base of a tree near the stables. Sweat soaks your shoulders, but your heart feels light. A young boy standing nearby asks, Mister, you can ride now? You nod. Then you're better than a lot of folks. Yesterday a man fell and broke his arm. Then the horse kicked him and broke his ribs. They took him and the horse toward the graveyard. The horse did it on its own? It thought he was luggage. You laugh. It hurts your stomach, but it's the kind of pain that has value. The pain of a lesson learned. You wake up with your back feeling like someone used a cutting board on it all night. But that's not what makes your heart race. It's the sound of gunfire. Not one shot, not two, but three in quick succession, followed by a silence so profound it's as if the entire town is holding its breath. You rush down the stairs, almost tripping on a slipper someone left on a step. The saloon, where people usually gather to pretend the day will be peaceful, is eerily quiet. A man in the corner pours a drink with a trembling hand. You find Clay at the bar, cleaning his gun. What happened? Don't know who got shot yet, but this morning someone was standing in the wrong place. You frown. The wrong place? Clay glances at you. In the West, every post, every chair, every wall has an owner. Not by deed, but by habit. You sit where someone usually sits. You stand where someone usually stands. You're stepping on their ego. But how am I supposed to know? You don't. That's why you should ask, observe, or stay away. You nod, your heart sinking. Here, space is not neutral. You step outside, no blood, no body. Just a small crowd gathered in front of the barber shop, where there's a bullet hole in the sign, and a tattered hat lying on the ground. A child asks you, Mister, you know why they shot each other? Before you can answer, he continues, 'Cause the man who got shot was standin' in the other man's shadow. You look again. It's true. The awning where the shooting happened casts a precious patch of shade in the scorching western sun. Clay walks up, sighing. He just got here 2 days ago. Thought he was hiding from someone. Turns out he just picked the wrong spot to stand. You shake your head. So, what do I do to not get shot? Simple. Don't stand still. Keep moving. But if you're tired, sit down. But sit behind someone. Never be the one blocking the view. You think to yourself, this is a survival game where the map is written in silence and blood. You start to notice who sits where, who stands for how long, who leans against which post, who always avoids the windows. You realize everyone has an invisible bubble of space around them. To touch it is to declare war. You ask Clay, has anyone ever stood in the wrong place and survived? One man, but he was blind. So they spared him? Number he shot first? You mean he was blind but had faster reflexes? After that, no one dared to blame him. They even invited him to sit at the head of the table. You give a twisted smile. This world is insane. It's not insane, Clay says. It just has its own logic. A logic you've never known. That night, you stand on the edge of the street. Not leaning, not blocking anyone, not staring. You feel like a ninja in a herd of cattle, except this ninja is terrified and thirsty. A young man approaches, stopping right where you were about to step. Friend, you say, I apologize. I didn't mean to block your view. He looks surprised, then smiles. You're new, aren't you? Yes. Good. At least you won't die a stupid death like that fella today. You think sometimes survival is just knowing when to step aside. That afternoon, it was so hot the sparrows didn't even bother to fly, just sat in the shade of a telephone pole, panting. You were nursing a glass of lukewarm water, a luxury greater than gold here when a deafening crack shattered the air. You jump. Not thunder, not fireworks. It was a gunshot. But this time, something was different. Sharper, more repetitive. A second shot rang out. Then a third. You bolt up and run into the street to see a sight that's both hilarious and heartbreaking. A drunk man, wearing shorts and a pajama top with a sailor's hat on his head, is staggering down the middle of the street, a gun in his hand. Not a normal pistol, but a tiny derringer, the kind of weapon people hide in their socks or wedding dresses for a surprise. He's firing into the air and shouting, I'm the law! Anyone who doesn't stand still, I don't know what to do. You hide behind a wooden barrel, your heart pounding like a war drum. Clay steps out of the saloon, his eyes narrowed, hand on his hip. That's Drunk Dick, Clay mutters. One of those crazies who lives off his own legend. Is he dangerous? When he's sober, maybe, but when he's drunk, bang! Another shot. You flinch. He's less dangerous than a fishbone stuck in your throat. Dick suddenly stops, spins around, looks at the sky, and pulls a potato from his pocket, stuffing it into the barrel of his gun. What is he doing? You ask. Clay shrugs. He calls it a backup round. If it goes off, you die from the explosion. If it doesn't, you die of curiosity. A brave woman steps out, yelling, Dick, that's enough, go home. Dick screams back, no, I'm protecting the law. Anyone who comes near me gets a gift of misery. Clay says to you, that's your chance. Go around his side and grab the gun. I'll create a distraction. Me? But I've never. You've survived this long, haven't you? First time for everything. Go on. Don't worry. His aim is terrible. Last week he tried to shoot a fly and hit the town well. You swallow hard, sneak behind a wagon, and inch closer. Dick is now arguing with a cat on a rooftop, the perfect opportunity. You lunge, grab the gun, and tumble with him into a pile of hay. The two of you are tangled up like noodles in a soup bowl. He yells, "Who are you? The real police?" "No," you gasp. "I just wanted to stop you from shooting Misery." He stares at you, then bursts into tears. I just wanted someone to believe I was still important." You exhale, holding the gun in one hand and patting his back with the other. Clay walks over, takes the gun, and nods. "You did good." He's just lonely. Everyone's lonely out here, but no one has the right to turn their loneliness into a weapon. You watch as Dick is led toward the church, where a few people care for the town's lost souls. A few pieces of raw potato are still stuck to his shirt. You wonder, if a man can go mad just because no one listens to him, how many others in this town are standing on the edge of a cliff that no one can see? Clay seems to read your mind. You ask me how many people here have guns. You should ask how many people here need someone to listen to them. Clay grows somber. More than you think. In the West, a voice doesn't carry unless it's accompanied by a bullet. That night, you write, "Sometimes survival isn't about dodging a bullet, but about knowing how to stoop down and listen to the cry behind the gun." After the incident with the drunk and the potato, your reputation in town saw a slight increase. People started calling you the gun grabber or the potato stopper. One kid even drew you as a superhero, holding a gun with a smoking barrel from which a potato was falling. However, in the West, reputation is a double-edged sword, and the other edge cuts deep. That afternoon you were sitting on the steps of the salt shop, chewing on a piece of cornbread as hard as wall plaster when a stranger appeared. He wore a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a coat slung over his shoulder. His eyes were sharp, his lips a thin line, and his walk as slow as the background music in a cowboy movie. A silence surrounded him, not the kind where people don't care, but the kind where they're waiting to see who dies. You glance at Clay. He has stopped drinking, his hand near his gun. "Who's that?" you ask softly. "Luke the 7, Clay replies. "The man who never loses at cards, not because he's lucky, because if he's about to lose, he shoots first." Luke walks straight to the poker table on the saloon porch. Without a word, he drops a fistful of money and pulls a private deck of cards from his pocket, faded, slightly torn at the edges, but each card stacked as carefully as a weapon. You're drawn to the table like a moth to a flame. There's an empty seat, and before you know it, you're sitting down. Luke looks at you, a small smile playing on his lips, the kind of smile that says, "I've seen more corpses than smiles like that." "You're the one who stopped the drunk," he says. "It's not a question." You nod. "A mistake. Then you have luck. I want to see how long it lasts." You swallow hard. Someone hands you a set of cards. You pick them up with trembling hands, your stomach in knots. The first hand, you lose. The second, you draw. The third, you win bizarrely with a full house. Luke says nothing, but something cold runs down your spine. The next hand, you draw 4 of a kind. Your heart pounds. You place your bet. Luke looks at his cards, then says, "All in." You freeze. There's enough money on the table to buy the entire saloon. You stammer, I don't have enough to call." "Bet your life." Clay coughs behind you. "You don't have to play, kid. Fold." You look at Luke, at your cards, at the faces around you. The whole town is holding its breath. Luke says, If you win, I disappear, never touch you again. If you lose, you disappear in a different way. You look down, then fold your cards. I'm out. Luke looks at you, then smiles faintly. Smart. He stands up, collects the cards and the money. But if anyone asks why you're alive, remember to say it's because you knew when to bow your head. Clay pulls you away. Never play with a man who doesn't care about winning or losing. They play to measure another man's limits. You just saved your life and lost your reputation. You exhale, sweat drenching your shirt. You ask, did he really have a better hand than me? Clay laughs. Historians still debate whether Luke the Seven is truly lucky or just the best bluffer who ever lived. But one thing's for sure. Anyone who dared to check is no longer here to tell the tale. That night, you sit alone, thinking about the card game, about the town's silence when you were about to bet, and the relief of knowing that retreat is also a form of courage. You avoided the saloon for 2 days after that poker game. No one said anything to you, but you could feel their eyes not with contempt or malice, but quietly counting down how much longer you had to live. You didn't blame them. In the West, a man with no enemies is usually worthless, but being valuable means you risk being buried behind the saloon. And, as if fate were mocking you, that night you had to use the outhouse. The problem is, public outhouses in the West have no electricity, no locks, and certainly no proper walls. It was just a hole behind the saloon, shielded by 3 rickety wooden planks and a decorative cactus. You take your oil lamp and tiptoe out back. The night is pitch black, the dry wind scraping sand across your feet. You cautiously circle behind the saloon, following Clay's advice. Always carry a lamp and never go after midnight. You look around. No one. A stray dog howls in the distance. You approach, open the plank door, and sit down over the hole. And at that exact moment, you hear breathing. Not your breathing. Not the wind. Not a sound that should exist in this world at 1 in the morning in such a desolate place. You freeze, trying not to move. The breathing gets closer. You gently bring the lamp nearer, shining it toward the bushes next to the pit. The light illuminates a face, a person, or what used to be a person, crouched low to the ground, eyes wide open, mouth whispering, hands gripping the edge of the pit as if crawling out of the earth itself. You jump to your feet, nearly falling into the hole. The lamp drops and shatters, plunging everything into darkness. Don't, a voice hisses. You turn to run, but your foot gets tangled in some kind of chain, and you fall. When you scramble up, light from the saloon floods the area. Clay and a few others run out. What's wrong? You point behind the pit. Clay shines his lamp. There's no one there, only a long drag mark in the sand, as if someone had been dragged away or had crawled away on their own. The escapee, someone whispers, the innkeeper's old son-in-law, was locked up for faking a funeral to steal money. Heard he died. Number I saw him. Right here. He was breathing. Clay looks at you, then signals for everyone to disperse. When it's just the 2 of you, he says, you met one of the old ones. What does that mean? Some folks are buried but don't die. Some are alive but no one remembers them. They come back every night. Not to scare people but to be seen. You shudder. Am I in danger? If you tell others, yes. They'll think you're crazy. Out here, being crazy gets you killed faster than being stupid. You nod, go back to your room, and lock the door tight. You don't sleep that night. Just lie there, listening to the wind sliding past like the whisper of someone who never got to finish their sentence. The next morning you go behind the saloon, just to be sure you weren't dreaming. The deep handprints are still in the sand, leading into the pit, but there are no tracks leading out. You didn't tell anyone what happened that night. Not because you were afraid they'd think you were crazy, but because deep down you didn't want the story to become real. Some things, when you say them out loud, suddenly gain weight, form, and claws. So you stayed silent, but you watched. You started noticing the people who often stood alone behind the saloon or talked to someone who wasn't there. You saw the old woman peeling carrots while muttering, "I know you're still there, Vinny." You saw an old man who, every evening, would place a bowl of soup under a tree, as if waiting for someone who would never come home for dinner. You gradually understood. The West wasn't just full of dust. It was full of ghosts. Not ghosts of people, but the parts of memory that hadn't had time to rot. Clay called you to a corner of the saloon that afternoon. You're about to be tested again. This time, by the White Hat Gang. You frown. White hats? Aren't they the good guys? Clay smirks. Out here, anyone who wears a white hat wants other people to think they're the good guys. So who are they? They call themselves keepers of the peace, but they're really just mercenaries. They protect whoever pays them. Whoever doesn't gets put on a blacklist. And you, after that poker game, you've become famous in all the wrong ways. You sit down, a cold sweat on your brow. What do I do? Stand your ground. Don't argue. Don't grovel. But don't show fear either. They can smell it. That afternoon, the White Hats appeared. 4 people in light-colored dusters, guns slung at their hips, all wearing the same expression, not caring about human life, only about what they were paid to care about. The leader was a woman. Her eyes were narrow, her lips as thin as a razor's edge, and her hair was braided like a rope, wrapped around her neck like a warning sign. "You're the new one," she stated. "Yes." "Got a survival permit?" You stare blankly. "There's no such thing here." "Oh, there is. New law as of 3 months ago. The outsider rule. Any newcomer who wants to stay must prove their value or have a sponsor." You swallow hard, looking around. Clay is nowhere in sight. What can I do? 3 options. 1, a gunfight. 2, pay the existence fee of $50. 3, take the night challenge, a mission everyone refuses until they have no other choice. I have no money and no gun. The challenge it is, then. The woman smiled, not with joy, but like someone selling a one-way train ticket. There's a place called the Hanging Well. The water there is delicious, but strangely, anyone who drinks it comes back changed. They become quiet, as if something has been taken from them. What do I have to do? Bring back a bottle of water from that well. Before dawn. Is it dangerous? Depends on what you believe in. Some say it's a haunted place. Others say it's a den for wild animals. But no one's ever come back with the full story. You nod. Not out of courage, but because you have no other choice. That night, you set out. Clay hands you a small knife and a cloth bag. Not going to say anything? You ask. If I say you'll be fine, I'd be lying. If I say you'll die, you'll tremble. So just go. And remember, don't trust the sounds behind you. You leave town and step into a land without a map. The moon hangs in the sky like a white eye watching you. The wind whistles like a flutist who's lost the last note. The sand gradually gives way to gravelly earth. You go deeper into the brush, touching branches that have no leaves but still rustle like the sound of clothes brushing against each other. The hanging well is exactly as its name suggests. It doesn't sit on the ground. It hangs from a cliff face like the throat of a monster thirsty for prayers. You tie a rope and climb down, each step a soft crack of rotting wood. At the bottom, you find a real well covered in moss. No smell, no reflection of light. You lean down and scoop up the water. It's crystal clear and as cold as a dead man's hand. When you look up, someone is standing at the mouth of the well. Their face is unclear. "Who's there?" You shout. No answer. You freeze, then look down. When you look up again, no one is there. You climb back up, faster than your muscles should allow. You reach town just as dawn is breaking and hand over the bottle of water. The woman in white takes it, sniffs it, and nods. Good. You get to live for another week. Another week? New rule. Outsiders need to prove themselves continuously. You laugh, a dry, hollow sound. Clay approaches. "You okay?" "I'm not sure." "Then you're better off than most." You go back to your room and put the bottle of water down. No one drinks from it. From that day on, you start to hear whispers every night when the wind blows through the cracks in the door. It's unclear who's whispering or in what language. You only know that it never leaves you. After the night at the hanging well, you changed. Not in the transformative way you read about in inspirational articles online, but in the way of being peeled, layer by layer. The layer of safety, the layer of confidence, the layer of faith in reason. You became wary of things you once considered harmless. The unusual slant of a tree's shadow, a change in the wind's direction, someone's gaze lingering a moment too long. You felt that something was watching you. Not a person, not an animal, but an existence. Clay noticed. You're not the same anymore. You walk lighter, talk less, and you don't look in mirrors. You didn't answer. The truth was, since that trip, you hadn't looked in a mirror, not because you were afraid of what was in it, but because you were afraid of what was standing behind you that didn't appear in the reflection. But you didn't have time to be afraid for long. A sandstorm was coming. The townspeople scurried about, either burying their food or collecting water. Clay called you to a hollow near the canyon and handed you a shovel. Today, you learn about traps, not to hunt, but to avoid being hunted. You dug as instructed, a hand's depth, covered with dry leaves, a thin layer of sand. If someone stepped on it, the dust would fly up, marking their footprints. If it was an animal, you'd know it had been there. If it was a person, you'd know you were about to be targeted. Clay pointed to a nearby bush. That used to be a sniper's hiding spot. Every time someone left town, he'd follow. If he didn't kill them, he'd track them. If he didn't catch them, he'd burn their camp. In the end, he was crushed by his own trap, fell into a deep pit he'd dug himself. You shuddered. The lesson is, don't dig a pit if you can't remember where it is. Clay nodded. And never think you're the only one who knows how to set a trap. Out here, every word is also a trap. That evening, as the sandstorm raged, the town sealed its doors. You took shelter in the wine cellar behind the inn, a place that once stored contraband and was now a reluctant sanctuary. In the darkness, you sat with about 8 other people around an oil lamp. The hiss of the sand outside sounded like 100,000 snakes crawling on the roof. A young man's voice trembled. "Can a storm like this wash away the whole town?" an old man replied. Number? But it can wash away people's minds. What do you mean? When people are trapped together in the dark, with no water, no way out, they don't wait for the sand to do evil. They do it themselves. The woman next to you squeezed her husband's hand. A child slept in the corner, hugging a headless doll. You looked around, no one spoke, but no one took their eyes off anyone else. The silence was shattered every time someone so much as sneezed. You remembered Clay's words. If the storm doesn't kill you with sand, it'll kill you with paranoia. Around midnight, there was a scraping sound at the cellar door. Someone or something was trying to get in. Everyone stood up. You whispered, "Did anyone lock the door?" No one was sure. Clay wasn't here. You gripped the knife hidden in your pocket. The door burst open. It was just the wind, but someone stepped inside. A man, his face completely covered by a wet cloth, holding a staff. "Please," he rasped, "just for one night. I have water. I have salt. I have no gun." The people looked at each other. The young wife shook her head. The old man gave a slight nod. "You make the decision," he said to you. For the first time you were given the choice. "Your staff," you said. "Give it to me to hold." The man nodded, came inside and sat in a far corner. He didn't say a word for 2 hours. When the wind died down and dawn broke, you opened the door. Everyone filed out of the cellar. You turned back. The man was gone. The staff was still there. The water canteen was still there. But the man was not. You asked around. No one saw him leave. No one saw him sleep. No one remembered his face clearly. A child said, "I don't think that man had a shadow." You fell silent. On the post near the cellar you saw a small carving, the shape of a closing eye. Clay appeared behind you. There are people or things that live in the sand. When a storm comes, they borrow human form to take shelter. Those who accept them live. Those who refuse them disappear in the storm. No one ever finds a body, only the eye mark. "So did I do the right thing?" you asked. No one knows, but no one died last night. Sometimes survival doesn't mean you were right. It just means it wasn't your turn. That night, you didn't return to your room. You set up a small camp in the middle of the town square, where the wind blew freely and no one dared to approach. You sat there, eyes open, ears listening. The sand still blew, but you began to hear your own voice clearly. Early in the morning, while the sky was still covered in a hazy layer of dust from the storm, you were awakened by a strange screeching sound. Not the wind, not a gunshot, but a sound as grating as metal scraping against a soul. You went outside. In the middle of the town square, where you had pitched your tent last night, there was something new. A carriage. Not a normal horse-drawn carriage, but a hearse. The carriage was painted black with silver trim, its wheels iron-clad. 2 oil lamps were still burning, though no one had seen it arrive. On the hearse, a long coffin was draped in black velvet, embroidered in white thread with the words, "No name." There was no driver, no wheel tracks in the sand, just it and you. You looked around. No one in town was awake, or no one wanted to see. You approached, your hand trembling slightly. On the velvet cloth covering the coffin was a letter, sealed with red wax, addressed to you. No mistake. You opened it. The nameless one, he who has seen too much and has not yet died, needs to learn how to play dead. Lie down, before someone makes you do it permanently. The Collector. You read it over and over, not understanding, not daring to understand. Just as you were about to turn away, a figure appeared, Marius, the locksmith, the coffin maker, the craftsman of things no one wanted to name. He stepped out of the shadows and nodded at you. You've seen it, have you? You know about this. I don't just know it. I once built it. For who? For anyone brave enough to be reborn. You frowned. What do you mean? You've been hunted? You've been spared, you've survived. But you've never hidden. That carriage is your chance. To do what? To play dead. To disappear. To learn how to hide in a world where every glance is a knife. You looked at the open coffin. Inside was not empty, but a replica of you, made from straw, rags, and real hair. It looked so much like you, it was terrifying. You backed away. I'm not doing this. No one wants to. But you've been chosen. The Collector only sends letters to those standing between two lines, living or merely existing. You ran. That night the town was in an uproar. A man had been killed, not with a gun, but with a knife, in the dead of night, without a sound. The dead man was a gunslinger who had beaten Clay in a duel a year ago. No one saw anything. They only knew that a shadow had stepped out of the saloon after midnight and disappeared with the bones. You returned to your room and sat down on the cold tile floor. The letter was still in your pocket. You opened it again. The words had changed. The one who understands does not need to ask again. The one who does not will be taught. No one dies on the second night if you lie down. You lit a lamp and ran to find Clay. He was cleaning his gun. The hearse was still there. Ah, he said. So you were invited. Why me? Because you've lived too long. A lot of people don't like that. In the West, someone who survives better than others is always a thorn in their side. So what do I have to do? Clay looked you straight in the eye. Lie in the coffin for one night. If the sun still shines in your eyes tomorrow morning, you'll be recognized as someone who can't be killed easily. And sometimes that alone is enough to make others stop trying. And if I refuse, then prepare for the third night. That night there will be no letter, only people and blood. You went back and walked to the hearse. The coffin lid was open. The night wind swept over the velvet cloth like someone's whispering hand. You climbed in. The lid closed. Darkness. The smell of wood, old fabric, and yourself. The space was so small your breath became an echo. You closed your eyes but couldn't sleep. Every second was an hour that didn't tick but still passed. You heard footsteps, dragging sounds, the clang of a metal door opening somewhere far away. You weren't sure if you were dreaming or awake. And then you heard a voice. Breathe slowly. You need to get through this night to see the next. It's even worse. You woke up. The hearse was still there, but the coffin was empty. You were lying on the ground, your neck as stiff as a rock, your shirt torn at the elbow. Clay sat nearby and tossed you a canteen of water. You lived. Good. Now everything gets harder. Why? Because from now on, you're not a newcomer anymore. You're someone worth watching. You didn't know whether to be happy or scared. You stood up. For the first time in your entire journey, you didn't feel hungry. You didn't feel thirsty. You just felt empty, as if you had buried a part of yourself last night, along with the fake corpse in the coffin. You turned and walked away without looking back. The hearse dissolved into the wind. You were alive, but you were no longer a survivor in the same way. Before, you were a lost wanderer, empty-handed and wide-eyed. Every kick, every punch, every glance, every gunshot was a lesson. Now, you were a name with a reputation, not famous, but remembered, and in the Wild West, that was a dangerous burden. The innkeeper started calling you by your name, whereas before she just called all newcomers that fella. The kids didn't run when they saw you anymore. One even pressed a ginger candy into your hand with the comment, "You're not afraid of coffins, mister. You must be a ghost." Even Clay, a man of few words, started asking for your opinion. If I were to set a trap for someone, do you think I should leave a way out or not? You thought for a moment, then replied, "Leave a way out, because if he survives, he'll know he was spared. Next time, he'll be afraid. But if there's no way out, he'll fight to the death and might take you down with him." Clay nodded. You learn fast. But you're about to learn the hardest thing of all, negotiation. That afternoon, a group of people arrived from the next town over. Their clothes were cleaner, their speech smoother, and their eyes as sharp as a poison-laced knife. The leader was a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a face that looked like it was carved from limestone, showing little emotion. But every frown was a life-or-death decision. "My name is Gran," he said. "Your town is situated over an underground water source that we have been tapping for the past 3 dry seasons." Clay stood by the table, his gloved hands on display, and replied slowly, "That water is underground. The land above it is ours. But the water itself belongs to no one. It flows. It has no address. It is free. We don't stop the water from flowing. We only stop people from digging." Gran looked around. "We need a portion of the well, a pipe or a small path, within 3 days." Clay crossed his arms. "If not," Gran continued, "I've brought men, not to threaten, but to remind you that we are thirsty." Everyone was silent, but you saw something different. In Gran's group, a young woman stood slightly apart from the rest. Her clothes were older, her hands dusty. Her eyes weren't on Clay nor on Gran. Her eyes were on you. Not the look of a scout, but the look of someone who knew you, and then you remembered. She was the one who had given you the vial of snake pepper for your bowl of beans. You took a step forward. She gave a slight nod, a signal, a small but clear connection. She knew something and wanted to talk. You turned to Clay and whispered, "I want to negotiate with them. Alone. Are you sure? If we don't try, there will be bloodshed." That evening, you were invited to Gran's temporary camp. Seated across from him, there was only a cup of hot tea, a wooden table, and the young woman. "I hear you once lay in a coffin for a night," Gran said. "I like people like that. Gutsy, resilient. But are you reasonable?" "I'm reasonable when I know the price of reason. And what do you think water is worth?" "A human life," you replied. Gran laughed. "A good answer, but idealistic. I need practical." The young woman interjected, "There's a way for both sides to have water without a single shot being fired." Gran glanced at her but didn't stop her. "There's a secondary stream," she continued, "running parallel under the valley. Not deep, not large, but enough to create a dividing point. We drill a well at that point, half for each side. But it must be done secretly." "Why?" Gran asked. "Because if people see us successfully negotiate, those who live off conflict will be out of a job, and those who have bet on a war will not be happy." An hour passed. Finally, Gran stood up. "A deal. But if I'm betrayed, I don't send a warning letter. I send a coffin." The next day, You and the young woman went to survey the secondary stream. On the way, she told you, I left that other town when I was young. My mother was falsely executed for stealing water. I only came back to make sure they don't do the same thing to this place. Then why are you helping us? You asked. Because here, I saw you be grateful for a single piece of candy, and no one who is grateful for small things is a bad person. When you returned, everything unfolded as planned. The well was drilled, the underground pipe was divided. The town lost nothing and gained a reputation for being dangerous but reasonable. Clay looked at you and nodded. Negotiation is a game where you have to let your opponent think they've won. You said nothing, just looked toward the well where the water was beginning to flow in two directions. Half for the other side, half for the people here. And a part of you felt that you were slowly becoming a person of this land. You don't know exactly when it started, but one morning you woke up and realized that the townspeople had begun asking for your opinion, not on big things like life and death, war, or well water, but on smaller things, which made it all the more frightening. What do you think I should plant for the next dry season? Should my daughter marry that wagon driver? If I run away with my husband's liquor money, do you think I'll be found? You became the person everyone thought had the answers, not because you were smart, but because you had stayed. You were still alive after so many trials, and in the West, someone who lives a long time is as rare as rain. Clay said, You're becoming a center of gravity, and when you pull both the good and the bad. You didn't understand right away, not until the bad came looking for you. One hot afternoon, you were invited to a house at the end of town, a place no one had ever invited you to before. The wooden door was studded with large nails. The air smelled of dried mint and pine. Inside was a man you had never met, old, but clean. His clothes were dust-free, his hands covered in scars, but his fingernails were neatly trimmed. My name is Ellis, he said, pouring tea as if this were a French patisserie. I've been watching you for a while. You learn fast. You breathe the Western way. You live like someone from here. But there's one thing you don't yet understand. You sat silently, waiting. Anyone who stays here long enough chooses a side. There are two sides. One is the visible, the strong, the gunslingers, the ones who make the laws and then break them. The other is the hidden, the ones who know everything, but no one knows who they are. I am the latter. You swallowed hard. I haven't chosen a side. Wrong. Not choosing is standing in the middle, and standing in the middle makes you bait. Everyone wants to cut you open first to see what's inside. So, what do you want? Ellis smiled and pulled out a map. It didn't show the town, but what was beneath it. Tunnels, passages, hideouts, underground shops, secret brothels, unofficial jails. I have the system. I need someone to walk between the worlds, someone the side above trusts and the side below doesn't fear. I choose you, and if I refuse, you'll continue to live. But you'll start to lose things, one by one. A friend, a shelter, a drop of water, until you come back or there's nothing left. You left Ellis's house with the map in your hand. Clay stopped you at the saloon door. You met him. You nodded. Who is he? Ellis used to be the mayor. He was ousted after daring to hold a public poll. No one does that in this West. He survived because no one knew where he went. Now he controls everything from the shadows, and he only approaches those he believes are worth betting on. Am I worth it? That's not a question for me. It's a question for you. That night, You sat alone by the dry well. No more water, only echoes. You tossed a pebble down and didn't hear it hit the bottom. You remembered Clay's words, Ellis's words, the words of the girl at the stream. You can't stay neutral forever. You thought about the child who gave you candy, the old woman who gave you a cloth, the man who sat beside you during the storm. If you chose a side, you could protect them. If you didn't, you would lose them. You opened the map. Ellis had circled a spot, noting in red ink, "Entrance behind the old bakery, 23 steps from the burnt cactus." You began to build a profile of the town. Who went where? Who was friends with whom? Who held their gun in their left hand? Who traded water for medicine? Whose footprints didn't match their story? You became the one who knew. And then you received an invitation from the neighboring town. Not a threat, but a cultural exchange. The stories had spread. The man who didn't die sleeping in a coffin. The one who divided water with words, not guns. The one who could talk to both sides without getting shot in the back. You set out, riding alone. No one saw you off, no one said goodbye, but everyone watched, and you understood. You were no longer a stranger in this town. You were the one who would be asked the last question before the trigger was pulled. You arrived in the next town at dusk. The sky was a fiery red, as if the sun were being slow roasted after a long day of observing the gradual decay of this land. Unlike the place you had left, this new town seemed orderly. The houses were square, the doors shut tight, the signs not crooked, the walls repainted, the trees pruned. The people moved quietly, as if living in an etiquette book. But there was no laughter, no dust, no freedom. You stopped your horse in front of the town hall, the only building with a steel railing. 2 men stood guard. One wore a gray-blue uniform, the other civilian clothes, but with unblinking eyes. "Name?" the soldier asked. "Call me the survivor." He didn't write it down, just nodded for you to proceed. The door opened. The scent of pine and gun oil wafted out. You were led into a large room where a group of people was already waiting. No one introduced themselves. No one sat lower than anyone else. But one man sat in the middle. He wore a dustless suit, the first strange thing in this region. In his hand he held a string of wooden beads. No cross, no symbol. Each bead was carved with a number. "We've heard about you," he said. "The one who knows how to make guns stop firing and water stop leaking. The man from the town with no name." You didn't react, waiting for him to get to the point. "We want to buy you." A statement delivered with no inflection. You blinked. Buy? Not your body. Your influence. You are becoming a name the people trust. And people like us don't like things that are trusted before they are controlled. So what would you have me say? Suggest, direct, nod at the right time. Shake your head at the right moment. And when necessary, play dumb. You sat silently. He continued. "In return, you'll have water, weapons, early information, and relative safety. And when you die, we'll let you die with a headstone. That's a luxury around here. And if I refuse, you'll die in an unmarked hole and no one will remember you ever existed." The atmosphere wasn't tense, not forceful. Just a clarity as stark as the midday sun, with no shadows. You asked for time to think. You were given exactly 3 hours. They called it brain-weighing time. You left the building and walked through streets that were clean to the point of being soulless. No one looked at you. No one spoke. Everyone disappeared into their homes before you got close. You went to the only open cafe. No music, no menu. The server was a young woman with dark circles under her eyes and a slight tremor in her hands. "A glass of water," you said. "Do you want silence?" she asked. "I have too much silence already." She smiled, the first truly sad smile you'd seen here. "I used to live in your town," she said, "but I chose order, cleanliness. Everything is clear here. Everyone does the right thing. No one gets shot by surprise." "Then why are you trembling?" "Because here, getting shot comes with a permit." She set down a folded piece of paper. No signature, no address. Just one line. "If you nod, they win. If you shake your head, we begin." You looked at her, but she was already gone. You opened the paper. Inside was a map of the town's tunnels, escape routes, ammo caches, and reserve water stashes. You understood. There were people in this town who were still breathing but not living, and they were waiting for someone to light the fuse. You returned to the main building. The man was still sitting in the middle, the beads still running through his fingers. "Do you have an answer?" "I do. I will neither nod nor shake my head. I will tell. I will tell the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. Whether people believe it or not is their right." He nodded. "So you choose the third way. A pity." He stood up and signaled a guard to escort you out. No violence, no threats. Just, "In 3 days, if you are still here, we can't guarantee anything for that head of yours." You returned to your town. No one asked, but everyone knew. Clay handed you a thick piece of paper. "We hear you. If you need us, knock 3 times on the well post. We will come." You burned it right after reading. They didn't need a name. They just needed a start. 3 days passed since your return. Your town, the town with no name, was no longer the same. Not because it had changed, but because you had. You started seeing things you hadn't noticed before. Every footprint in the sand, every handkerchief fluttering from a window, every sign tilted at an angle, each small detail carried a message, a warning, an unanswered question. You heard rumblings at midnight, a light scratch on wood, someone coughing 3 times and then stopping. It was no longer noise, it was signal. You knew someone was watching you, but you didn't know who. You knew someone was protecting you, but you didn't know from where. You understood that after that night in the neighboring town, you had become the center, not of attention, but of intent. Clay didn't see you as much. He was busy, or intentionally keeping his distance. But every time you turned your head, he was still there, not close, but close enough to act if something happened. And then one morning, while you were helping the innkeeper patch her roof, a letter was slipped under the door. No seal, no address, just 3 lines. "The moon will rise at noon. The gun will fire when no one is holding it. You must leave before someone claims the right to say you are dead." You didn't need to ask who sent it. You knew it was Ellis. You went to find Clay. What's coming? Something this place has been trying to avoid for a long time. War? Clay shook his head. A choice. That night, you went up the hill, the highest point in town. The wind howled, whipping sand into your face like a reminder. This place was never gentle. You stood next to the dried cactus that used to be an old watch post. From here, you could see every rooftop, every light, every sound, and you saw a group of people meeting behind the warehouse. No lamps, no fire, but the sound of steady footsteps. You went down the hill, following the familiar path between two wooden fences. You heard them. No more neutrality. The other one refused. He wants to tell, not direct. Then let us rewrite the story. And the people? The people believe whoever lives the longest. He's lived a long time. But if he dies the right way, they will listen to us. You stepped back. Your foot landed on a dry branch. Crack. The silence shattered. Running. The sound of a knife being drawn. You fled toward the well, not because it had water, but because you remembered the signal. 3 knocks. You reached it. Knocked once, twice, 3 times. Then you stood there, panting. No one came. 10 seconds. 20. Then a hand on your shoulder. Not Clay, not Ellis. It was the young woman from the other town. They knew you wouldn't choose, she said. They want to turn your death into a silent consensus. Why are you here? Because you were the first person to ask if I was okay when my hand was shaking as I poured water. Are they coming? They're coming. But so are we. Behind her, shadows emerged from the wine cellar, from the abandoned cattle pen, from the old bakery where Ellis had shown you the way. They carried no flags, no symbols, only scars. The people who had lived, who had lost, who had been forgotten. But now, they were stepping up. When the other group arrived in the center of town, ready to hang someone to ensure order, they found a circle of people already standing there. No talking, no shouting, just standing. In the middle of the circle was you, hands empty, shirt dusty, eyes not lowered. You said you didn't choose a side, the leader of the other group said. So what is this? I don't choose a side, you replied. I choose the truth. The truth has no weight if no one protects it. Then try and take it from me. Silence. Then a click. A pistol fell from someone's hand, untouched. Everyone turned. The wind blew hard. The moon rose. At noon, just like the letter said. That day, no one died. No one won. But people began to write things down. You didn't become the mayor, or a general, or a priest. You just became the one who was remembered. The one who had lived long enough to be chosen, to refuse, and to live on. 3 days after the night, no one dared to raise a gun. You realized that silence didn't mean peace. It was a postponement. And in the Wild West, a postponement meant time to prepare. Ellis found you, his face pale as if he hadn't slept. Something is coming, he said, and no one knows which side it's on. A person? An idea. It's creeping into every conversation. The people are starting not just to listen, but to doubt. You remembered the looks you got walking through the market yesterday. Not gratitude, no longer fear, but judgment. You had survived. You had prevented bloodshed, but they wanted more. You went to the home of the coffee girl. Her real name was Mara. She was carving notches into a wooden wall, counting the lost, she said. Not to violence, but to believing in something. So they died for hope? She shook her head. They died because they had no leader, because they thought someone else would do it. You looked at her, then at the 71 notches on the wall. Will I be carved here if I fail? She smiled faintly. Number. If you fail, people forget your name. No one carves anything. You returned to the wooden shack by the well where you had once knocked 3 times. You began to write by hand. No announcements, no pamphlets. You wrote the history of the town, but not like a textbook. You wrote in the second person as if the reader were you. You told of the first time you set foot in this place. about how to filter water from the rusty tank behind the old warehouse, about the look in Clay's eyes when he handed you your first gun without explanation, about the night wind carrying the smell of metal, a sign of an impending attack, about the first time you felt that survival was also a betrayal. You wrote for 7 days. On the 8th night, someone knocked on your door. It was the little boy whose pants you had helped patch with a piece of rope in the saloon. His name was Finn. "Someone wants to see you," Finn said. "They didn't say their name, but they know you once cut a rabbit snare on the West Hill." You blinked. Only one person knew that. The person you thought had died in Part 6. Lucan. You followed Finn through the night, over hills, across a bridge of rotting wood, and into a small rock crevice you could only enter by crawling on your elbows and knees. Inside, there was an oil lamp, and 3 people. Lucan lay on a bed of straw, one arm amputated, one eye bandaged. "I stayed alive because I wanted to hear you finish the story," he rasped. You were speechless. "Lucan," he continued, "you didn't kill anyone, but you made the whole town stand still. That's a talent, but I'm afraid you're not ruthless enough for what needs to be done next." "What is that?" "Choose a successor, because if you die, the story dies with you. I don't plan on dying." "Here," Lucan said, "everyone plans on living. Until someone knocks on their door late at night, you left the cave, your head filled with thoughts of successors, of records, of what would happen if the storyteller himself was left to be forgotten. The next morning, you gave the manuscript to Mara. If I disappear, print this, but don't put my name on it." Mara didn't ask why. She nodded and handed you a cloth bundle. "The shirt of the first person who ever tried to tell the history of this place," she said. "He failed. But wearing this, at least they'll listen for the first 3 minutes." You put on the shirt. It was indigo, faded, and smelled of mold and the sweat of a man long gone. You stepped onto the small platform in the middle of the market where they used to hang people, auction horses, and announce water shortages. You raised your hand. No one laughed. No one shooed you away. For the first 3 minutes, they listened. You told them about the well with the scratching sound, about the 3 knocks, about the moon rising at noon, and you said, "I am no one, but I have seen, and I will not pretend I have not." They were silent. Then, applause, not thunderous but real. You knew. A true story told at the right moment can change things. Not the dry, sandy wind of the desert, but the soft, damp, salty wind of the sea. You looked up and saw the sky turning gray, not because of a storm, but because a ship was coming. No one ever thought the Wild West would have a harbor. But at the end of the railway, where trains used to arrive and never return, a dark silhouette now appeared. No roar, no smoke, just a mast, standing straight like a declaration. The first person to see it was the boy, Finn. "There's writing on the sail," he shouted. "But it's the writing of people who don't talk like us." You squinted. The whole town poured out to the end of the railway, as if drawn to something older than the town itself. On the sail, there was indeed writing a cracked Gothic script, like something from an ancient manuscript. A tall, thin man stepped off the ship. He wore a black tailcoat, white gloves, his hair parted, a monocle in his eye. He had no gun, no allies. He only carried a book. He walked into the square. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice strange, each syllable sung, "I am the collector." The townspeople watched him with wary eyes. Clay stepped out of the saloon. Mara came down from a rooftop. You stood there, your hand gripping the edge of your indigo shirt. He looked around, stopping when he saw you. And this must be the storyteller. He smiled. What do you want here? You asked. I collect stories that no one has dared to tell. For what? To rewrite history for those who have no voice. On one condition, they must give up the right to tell it further. You understood. He wasn't a publisher, not a scholar. He was an eraser, a man who turned history into his personal property. You invited him to sit in the cafe at Mara's old spot. I will tell you, you said, but only a part. He smiled. I will write, but I will tear out the page if I don't like it. You began to tell, from the story of the wolf that didn't bark in part 3, to the night the cactus bled in part 7, to the gun that fell on its own in part 19. The collector didn't blink. He wrote every line, his pen leaving a trail of purple ink on the parchment. When you stopped, he said, Good, but now give me the full manuscript. I don't have it. Don't lie. The paper still smells of ink. I gave it to someone, and that person tells it to no one but themselves. He was silent, then sighed. One day you will understand. Everything that is not written down can be stolen. Or perhaps, you said, it is because it is not written down that it lives longer. 3 days later, the collector left town. Not angry, not accusing. He just wrote one last line in his book. This town refuses the future to live forever in its memories. You weren't sure you agreed, but you knew he hadn't won, and that was enough. That night, Mara found you. There's someone at the docks, she said. Not to collect, but to give back. You went. It was an old woman, her skin as wrinkled as parchment, her cloak a silvery blue like the new moon. You have kept your story, she said. So, do you want to hear mine? You nodded. She opened a small bundle. Inside was a map, drawn in red ink on leather. It showed your town, a road no one had ever walked, and a mountain that didn't exist. Someone once told a story about this place, she said. Then they were forgotten. Can you find it again? You looked at the map, no notes, just a strange symbol in the corner. 3 dots intertwined, like the footprint of a 3-toed bird. Who drew this? You asked. She shook her head. Someone who no longer remembers who they are, but still wants someone else to remember for them. And just like that, a new chapter opened. No one forced you to go. No one made you stay. But you knew if you stayed, the story would end. If you went on, the story would continue to write itself. You wrapped your manuscript and hid it in the foundation of the saloon wall. You put on the indigo shirt and the shoes that were once torn at the heel in part 2. You walked to the edge of town, made a mark on a wooden post and stepped across. There was no music, no applause, just the sound of sand crunching under your heels and a map trembling slightly in the sea breeze. You walked on, not knowing the destination, only knowing that if you turned back, nothing would be the same. Not because the town had changed, but because you had. The first night beyond the boundary, you set up camp next to a dead tree. No campfire, no one around. Just the wind whistling through the bones of the rocks and the smell of dry bat droppings from a nearby cave. You opened the map. The 3-toed bird symbol in the corner began to glow under the moonlight. Not brightly, just enough to see this was no ordinary map. The next morning, you entered a land the townspeople used to call the Silent Gorge. There was no sound here, no birds, no wind, no footsteps. Only when you slapped your own chest Did you know your heart was still beating? You started writing on the rocks, just to confirm you still existed. I was here. No response. You wrote again. I will survive. And then you heard a sound. Not a human voice, but a whistle from somewhere within the rocks. You followed the sound to a crescent-shaped cliff. In the center was a cave entrance shaped like a smiling mouth. No one wants to crawl into a mouth, but you were used to doing things normal people shouldn't. You stepped inside. The light faded, then went out. It wasn't completely dark inside. There was a dim light, like a reflection from a mirror underwater. The entire cave was a library, but with no books. Only the smell of old paper and stones carved with words. You touched one slab. Words appeared. Never trust a story with no losers. You walked on, another block of stone. The survivor is often just the one who buries the bodies fastest. You stopped. This wasn't a library. This was a place where people hid the truth. Not by burning it, not by tearing it, but by locking it in stone so that only those with enough courage could read it. You pulled out a piece of charcoal and began to write on a blank patch of rock. Not your name, just, "There is a town where people live by not killing each other," and suddenly the cave lit up. Not with divine light, but as other writings appeared, connecting to your sentence. You had activated something. You backed away. Under your feet, the stone floor began to move. A block of stone lifted you up like an elevator. You rose to a round, domed room, empty except for a single rotting wooden swivel chair. You sat down. A voice echoed in your head, not through your ears. Storyteller, you have stepped through the crack. So what do you choose? To be remembered forever or to be forgotten? I don't need to be remembered, you thought. Only that the story is not bent. Then you will trade a memory to keep a truth. You didn't ask again. You understood the price. You closed your eyes. When you opened them, you were lying under the dead tree. The tent was gone. The map was gone. In your hand, you clutched a stone carved with the words, "Mara once loved someone whose name began with L." You couldn't remember who L was. You sat up slowly. A truth had been saved, but in exchange for something you could no longer name, you continued to walk. On the 5th day, you reached the mute city. Not a place where no one spoke, but where no one dared to. Signs were written in symbols. They communicated with nods, glances, or a precisely timed touch of the hand. You were led to an inn by being followed. When you stopped, your follower stopped. When you turned your back, they handed you a handwritten paper ticket. "We know you come from the West. Is there a story you don't dare to tell?" You wrote back, "Yes, but I carry with me the stories others don't dare to read." You were invited into a sealed house. It was a theater with no stage, only chairs facing away from each other. You were seated in one. Someone sat behind you. Neither of you could see the other's face. You began to speak. No one answered. You continued to tell your story. A voice from behind you spoke up. "I, too, have seen a well with a scratching sound." You turned. The chair was empty. Another person sat behind you. "I, too, have heard of the collector." Then a third, a fourth. Each came and went, but never faced you. At the end of the session, you saw a line written on your hand in ink from an unknown source. You are not alone in remembering. You left the mute city before the sun rose. They didn't see you off, but they left a small pouch in your backpack, a handkerchief embroidered with the symbol of a well, and a small teardrop-shaped mirror. No one wrote anything, but you understood. When needed, reflect the path upside down. The ground beneath your feet turned a dark brown, like fresh mud, though it hadn't rained. Trees bore flowers out of season. Butterflies flew in the freezing cold. You realized you were entering the disordered lands. In the disordered lands, everything was almost right. A tree that looked like a fig tree bore egg-shaped fruit. A rabbit had 4 ears. The footprints of someone who had walked before you were imprinted in the rock but pointed toward you. You set up a tent beside a mound of earth, but the next morning you woke up to find yourself in the middle of a derelict circus stage. The audience seats were rotten. Ropes hung from above. In the middle, a man in a clown costume was jumping rope with his own shadow. "Hey," you asked, "where is this?" He stopped. "This is where people practice laughing so they don't cry. And you? What did you bring?" "A story," he grimaced. "Worse than a contagious disease." You tried to leave, but every time you turned, you found yourself standing in a different corner of the stage. You tried closing your eyes and counting to 10. You opened them. The clown was gone. On the floor was just a letter. "To escape this place, you must dare to tell the dirtiest part of your journey." You sat down in the middle of the stage. No audience, no spotlight. You began to speak. Your voice hoarse, your sentences disjointed. You told of the time you pretended not to hear a cry for help from the swamp because you were too hungry and too scared. Of the time you ignored the look of a shoeshine boy being unjustly beaten to avoid getting involved. Of the time you wrote a lie to give the reader hope, even though you knew it wasn't true. You didn't cry, but rain began to fall on the stage from the rusty tin roof, from the broken chairs, from a place where there was no sky. You woke up in a dense forest, near an abandoned wagon with the letter M painted on it. Were you honest enough? You smiled faintly and nodded. For the next 3 days, you walked in silence. Not writing, not telling, not thinking, just walking. Each night the campfire burned low. You watched the flames as if looking back at your own bones. Then you came to the land of old milestones. There, stones were carved with numbers. 1, 2, 3 up to 99. Each slab was like a marker in time. On each block, a handprint was frozen in the stone. You placed your hand on milestone 100. It was empty. The slab vibrated slightly, and then questions echoed from all around. "Are you sure you're a good person? Do you remember the first face you abandoned? Do you tell this story to survive, or so that someone else can die in your place?" You didn't answer. You just pulled out the teardrop-shaped mirror, the gift from the mute city. You held it up. In the mirror was not your face, but the faces of all those whose pain you had met with silence. You bowed your head. A woman's voice whispered in your ear, "We forgive you if you remember. We haunt you if you dare to call our names." "I remember," you whispered back, "but I don't know all the names." The voice said, "Then keep telling, until someone hears themselves in the story and calls out their own name." You walked on. The weather began to turn cold. The ground was covered in a thin layer of frost, but green leaves still grew beneath it. You saw a small house in the middle of a field, smoke from its chimney drawing a thin line in the sky. You knocked. Mara opened the door. She was surprised. You came back. You nodded and held out the mirror. "I think I haven't looked closely enough, and I need help to keep the story from dying with the storyteller." He was silent for a moment, then nodded. "Come in. Someone is waiting." You stepped inside. In the house was a small circle of stones. In the middle, a pot of water boiled. 3 people sat around it: Ellis, Finn, and a strange man. The man spoke. I was the storyteller of this town 30 years ago, but I failed. I left, carrying my guilt. And now you've returned? You asked. Number? I'm only here to pass on the name. I can't hold it any more. You looked into his eyes and saw yourself, but older, emptier, quieter. You didn't refuse. You sat in the circle of stones and continued to tell. When you opened your eyes, it was dark. The fire in the circle was smoldering. Mara was asleep, slumped over a pile of old books. Ellis and Finn were tending the fire. The strange man was gone. No one asked where he went. You guessed he was never here to stay. You stepped out onto the porch. The sky was full of stars. You had never seen a shooting star, but tonight the sky seemed to be tearing apart piece by piece. Each piece carried some old wish from someone you had met, or from a part of yourself you had forgotten. You didn't make a wish, you just sat down. The next morning, Mara gave you a small wooden box. No lock, no carvings, just a faint inscription. Open only in complete silence. You put it in your inner pocket. Finn led you to the stables. There was an old short horse named Stitch, gray coat, one eye blind. But it waited for you like an old friend. You didn't ask the way. They didn't say goodbye. You and Stitch walked through the forest, across rivers, through a valley where the water had dried up. Every time you wanted to ask, "Where are we going?" Stitch would just snort and walk faster. On the afternoon of the 3rd day you reached the Black Tower. No one lived there, no one guarded it, but a sign still hung on the wall. This place keeps what is left of the storytellers. The door opened as you approached. No creak, no dust, no spiders, as if someone had just cleaned. Inside was a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever. On each turn of the staircase there was a small door with a brass plaque. The night of the storm, the day with no shadow, the blind man who saw, the storyteller's broken voice. You didn't open any of them. You didn't need to. Those memories belonged to others. When you reached the top, you stepped into the room of mirrors. All 4 walls were mirrors, but they didn't reflect you. They reflected snippets of stories told by the storytellers before you. Voices came from the void. A woman. I told the story of the one who lost their name, and I lost my name with them. A boy. I told my story with pictures. No one understood, but they still laughed. An old man. I told my story with silence. It was so painful they could still hear it. You walked to the center of the room. A stone table. On it, a single piece of brown chalk. No blackboard, just the air, thick as ink. You wrote on the air, "I am the what number storyteller." No one answered, but one word appeared. Enough. The wind began to rise. You couldn't see a door, couldn't see the stairs. Only a small open window. You looked down. Below was a town, but not the town you knew. It was a patchwork of all the places you had been. Mara's well, the abandoned circus, the library of stone, the theater of turned-back chairs. You realized your story had connected them. You breathed out softly, and then you opened the wooden box. Inside was nothing but a thin piece of paper with a single line. When you tell the right story, you no longer need to tell it. You understood, not because you had survived, but because you could be silent without fear of being forgotten. You left the tower at dawn. Stitch was gone. You walked alone, but your legs weren't tired. Your heart wasn't heavy. You passed by the well where Mara used to draw water. She was no longer there. Only the handkerchief you were once given, tied to the wooden handle of the bucket. You untied it and tied it around your neck for the first time, not as a mark, but to keep a promise. You passed through the mute city. They didn't speak, but this time they waved. You waved back. You passed by the swamp where you had once ignored a cry for help. This time you stopped. No one was crying, but you stepped down anyway. You dug through the mud to see if anything was left. You only found a small pocket watch, its glass cracked, its hands askew. You brought it up and placed it in the sun. Next time you said to no one, "If someone falls in here, I'll be the first to stoop down." That night, you didn't set up a tent. You lay in the middle of a barren field. The sky was empty, the ground hard. And for the first time since the journey began, you no longer felt like you were going anywhere. You hadn't just survived, you were done telling. You wake up in the middle of the field. The sun is high. No more dew, no more wind. Just one thing: emptiness. Not the sad or lonely kind, but a lightness, as if your mind has finally agreed to stop talking. You stand up and walk. You don't know where you're going. You don't need to know. But then you hear a faint, distant jingle. You turn your head. An old ox cart covered in dust, its wheels still turning slowly, as if carrying something very precious, very fragile. On the cart is a woman with silver hair, wearing a black cloak embroidered with white thread. Her face doesn't smile, but her eyes sparkle. She stops the cart beside you. "Get in." You don't ask who she is. You don't need to ask where you're going. You just get in. The wheels roll over the lands you've crossed, but they've changed. The poor town of yesteryear now has a library suspended between wind posts. The disordered lands are now full of bushes that can tell stories when you touch them. And the mute city has a paper stage where people watch a mirror reflecting themselves in silence. You see the woman who gave you the mirror. She sits in the crowd smiling. You ask the driver, "Is this real, or am I imagining it?" What you think is more important than what you tell. An imagined thing told enough times becomes real. So have I told enough? She looks at you. You haven't told the end. You fall silent. What is the end? It's the place where the character no longer needs to prove they've changed. Everything around them will say it for them. You get off at a nameless crossroads. A lone oak tree stands in the middle of the field. Its trunk is carved with old faint lines, written by unknown hands. Short phrases like, "I lied and survived. I was silent and others had to die. I ask forgiveness from those who are no longer alive to forgive." You pull out your small knife and carve a line, I told, and I am still here. No flourish, no name. But for the first time, you don't erase the line you just carved. That afternoon, a boy comes. His eyes are brown, his hair messy, his hands holding a crudely drawn map. He asks you, "Mister, are you the storyteller?" You hesitate. "I don't know any more. I used to be. Can you show me how to begin?" You look at him, then hand him the handkerchief, the mirror, and the piece of chalk. You don't have to use all of them. Just keep them as a reminder that you are responsible for everything you tell. The boy nods and runs off. You don't stop him because you understand. Not everyone who tells a story survives, but everyone who survives once had to tell one. That night, you sit alone by the fire, not telling stories, just watching the flames dance. Then you see yourself younger, older, more trembling. The other you looks at you now. Are we okay? Number. But we survived. Yes. And we didn't forget. The two of you look at each other, and then you both dissolve into the smoke. Near dawn, you hear a knock on a door. But there is no door. Only the field and the oak tree. The knock comes again. You look down. The small wooden box has opened again. A new line of text has appeared. If you are still alive, keep telling. But this time, don't tell it alone. You smile. The next morning, you set up a second chair by the fire. No one sits in it, but you begin to tell a story as if someone is listening. Then a stranger comes and sits down. They don't ask questions, don't interrupt. You continue to tell. Then another person, then 3, then 10. No one jostles for position. No one needs to prove who is more right. There are only broken, unfinished, raw stories told by people who are no longer trying to survive, but want to bear witness to what was lost. One day, you stop telling. You just sit and listen. You begin your days not by waking up, but by realizing you are still here. No more running, no more chasing, only breathing, waiting, listening. You build a simple shelter of rough cloth, nestled under the oak tree. People come and go. Some leave something behind: a piece of cloth, an unfinished poem, a whistle. You don't keep them. You just hang them on the tree branches like wind chimes, letting the wind retell their stories. One day an old man arrives. He doesn't speak, doesn't hear. He just gestures to ask if he can sit. You nod. The two of you watch the fire, though no one has added wood. Then the man takes a notebook from his pocket. No words, only drawings made with a trembling hand, but they contain something familiar. You bow your head. For the first time in many days, you can't tell a story because your story is on someone else's paper. That night, it rains. Not a downpour, but a stealthy rain that falls without a sound, leaving only the quiet, damp smell of earth. The fire goes out, but you don't feel cold. You dream. You dream you're in the middle of a trial, where the characters you've met are the jury. They ask, "Is it true that you survived?" You're about to say yes, but your tongue is frozen, because you understand that survival is not a title, it's a burden. You wake up. Your back aches. Your head is cold, but someone has rekindled the fire. You look up and see a young girl with braided hair and a patched coat. She looks at you, holding a glass jar. "I heard you're the storyteller. This jar is my mother's voice. It won't open any more. Can you help me?" You don't understand, but you take the jar. You shake it lightly, no sound. You think for a moment. You don't open the lid. You press your ear to the side of the jar. Nothing happens for a few seconds. Then a whisper, as thin as a strand of hair, drifts through. "Don't cry, my child." You hand it back to the girl. She bursts into tears. "Thank you. Thank you. It's not necessary." That voice wasn't in the jar. It was in you. She nods and leaves. You realize that storytelling isn't just about speaking. It's about listening. It's about making space for what needs to emerge. The next day, a man comes, carrying a wooden puppet with a missing arm and a cracked head. He says, "I used to be a storyteller with puppets, but then my hand was injured. and I couldn't dance anymore. But you still tell stories, right? You ask. He shakes his head. I lost my voice because I lost my familiar form. You smile and take the puppet, placing it on your own hand. Then today, let me dance for you, and you tell. He is silent for a moment. Then he nods. And so, one person told a story, and another moved in his place. No one heard the words clearly, but everyone understood. From then on, every day you held the fire for others to tell their stories. Some used stones, some used sand, some used their eyes. No one told a story the same way, but everyone needed to be told. You became the keeper of the space, not the main character, and you felt light. One afternoon, a group of children arrives. No one speaks a language you understand, but you give them a piece of old paper and a toy hammer. They laugh and retell an old story with circles and jagged lines. You don't understand it all, but you don't need to, because you have learned to trust that a story isn't told to be understood immediately, but to sow something that needs to sprout. You gradually step back, sitting under the oak tree, watching people take turns keeping the fire, setting up chairs, making space. You don't need to tell anymore. You have left a void, and that void is being filled not with a voice, but with people. You open your eyes in the middle of the night. No fire, no voices, no one. Just the sound of strange insects and the old smell of smoke on the wind. The cold isn't from the air, but from being left behind. You step out of the shelter and look around. Empty. No footprints, no symbols, as if the camp had never existed. You walk, following what's left, a handprint on a cliff face, a red thread tied to a branch, a small exclamation point in a patch of grass. Everything is like a message, but from no one. You wonder, where did they go? Then you ask something else. Did they need to tell me? You understand no one betrayed you. They just moved on, because your story, your role, had ended in that chapter. You wander through the nameless land, and for the first time in a long time, you feel afraid again. Not of danger, but of meaninglessness. You see yourself again younger, more hopeful, sitting in a sandstorm, clutching an old worn mirror that no longer reflects anything. You scream. No one hears. That night, you find a cliff face. You carve into it the things no one asked. I once survived by telling. I once told to survive. I have forgotten how to listen. I want to start again. The wind passes by, the only witness. Then, one misty morning, you see a light. Not the sun, but a small orb of light, hovering in mid-air like a giant firefly made of glass, emitting an echo. You approach. A voice emanates from within the orb. Do you remember the first story you told? You hesitate. Number. Then tell it again. But this time, start from the place you never dared to begin. You sit down. No fire, no audience, but you tell. When I was little, I broke my sister's toy because I didn't think she deserved something more beautiful than me. I once wrote a good poem and threw it away because no one praised it. I once waited for someone to save me while I myself abandoned others. You tell without filtering. You don't fix your voice. You don't try to make it logical. And a strange thing happens. The wind stops. The echo ceases. There is only you and your voice, raw, broken, but so honest it no longer needs an audience to exist. When you finish, the orb of light dissolves into dust. One speck of dust flies into your hand and becomes a piece of white paper. On it is a single line, "You are enough." You fold the paper and put it in your pocket, not needing to understand right away. You return to the old path. For the first time, you don't look for an audience. You look for a place to listen. You sit by a stream, close your eyes, and let every sound, the water, the insects, the rolling stones, become a wordless narrative. You are no longer the center. You are the background. A group of people passes by. No one recognizes you as the one who used to tell stories. You don't introduce yourself. But when one of them asks, "Does anyone know the story of the tree that was struck by lightning 3 times and still lived?" you say softly, "I do." And you tell, not to impress, but because you know, and the story knows you. You continue to move, not staying long in any one place, not setting up camp. You are the visitor who stops by to whisper a piece of a story. Sometimes no one responds, but every time you turn to leave, you see someone begin to retell the very story you left behind, in a different form, in a different voice, with a seashell, a song, a game of sand. You don't need to keep the fire anymore because it has caught on to others. You walk through a land with no name, no sound, no map, nothing to guide you, no one to ask for directions. But you are no longer lost, not because you know the way, but because being lost no longer matters. Some days you walk only a few steps and then sit down. Some days you walk until you can't see the sun. And some nights the only light is a memory, flickering like a firefly, flashing past, then gone. One misty morning you enter a strange valley. Everything there is still, not because there is no wind, but because everyone there has forgotten how to move. You see an old woman sitting motionless on a stone bench, her hand holding a half-finished piece of embroidery. The needle is still, the red thread tangled in a corner. Her eyes are wide open, unblinking. You walk on. A child stands in the middle of a meadow, hand raised as if flying a kite, but there is no string, no wind, only waiting, frozen in form. You reach the center of the valley, a stone square. There's a large clock, but it has no hands. Its face is covered in strange symbols. You don't understand, but you can feel it. This is where time is stuck. You try to speak. "Is anyone here?" Your voice sounds out, but doesn't echo. You sit down in the middle of the square, doing nothing, telling nothing, just being there. After a long while, you feel something strange, a small movement, not a person, but time itself. As if the moment you sat still, not trying to rescue, not trying to change, was enough for a breath to return. A leaf falls onto your shoulder, and like a signal, a sound rings out. Click. You look around. The minute hand of the clock has appeared. Then someone starts to blink. Another turns their head. The child's hand trembles. The embroidery falls from the old woman's hand. You say nothing. You just smile, and you leave. On the way down from the valley, you meet a young man. He looks at you and asks, "Are you the storyteller?" You nod. "But now, I only listen." He laughs. "Then listen to my story." You stop. He begins to tell. "I once loved someone, but I kept telling stories and they didn't listen. Then I fell silent, but they didn't ask. In the end, I realized I didn't know who I was telling the story for them, or for myself." You nod. No advice, no interruption. You just say, "A story doesn't need an ending to be heard." He nods and walks back toward the valley. You walk on, through a forest of reeds taller than your head, across a murky pond reflecting gray clouds, over a broken bridge with only half remaining. You sit down on this side of the bank, looking to the other. No one, no calls. Only a question rises. If no one is waiting for me, do I still continue? You think for a long time. Then you answer yourself by standing up. You turn your back and take a different path. One afternoon you come to a field full of bottles. Each bottle is a message. I hate that I didn't turn back. If anyone reads this, tell my mother I still smile. This story has no main character, only those who left it unfinished. You read each one. You don't add anything. You just arrange them in a spiral, not to send them on, but so that someone passing by will see that someone had listened. One day, you wake up in a dream. You see yourself sitting in a circle of people you've met. The fisherman, the girl with the glass jar, the old man who painted, the puppeteer, the woman who told stories with sand. Everyone is looking at you, not demanding, just waiting. You don't tell a story. You begin to sing. Off key, not in a clear voice, but you are real. And in that dream, everyone sings along. Not a single word is the same, but it all blends into one. You wake up, still humming, not remembering the words, but remembering the feeling of belonging to something. You walk on, and for the first time, you don't count how far. You don't ask how long. You just look at the sky, smell the earth, and know that you are surviving, not by avoiding danger, but by accepting the journey through everything that no longer has a shortcut. You arrive in a land of red dust. No map, no name, no one to call out to. Here, the mountains are as silent as a long-held sorrow that has never been spoken. And you, a storyteller who has passed through every form of silence, realize this is the final passage. Not the end of the journey, but the end of your need to search for anything more. You set up a simple tent, but don't lie down. You sit. Before you is a stone slab, as flat as if a hand had once rested on this earth and left its mark. You place your hand on it. You don't see anything. You just feel. All the times you told it wrong, told it incompletely, told too much, or told just to fill a void. You smile, because now you don't need to tell a story to exist. As sunset dyes the sky the color of dried blood, you see a figure approaching very slowly. It's a young girl, carrying a backpack too large for her. She says nothing, just sits beside you, silent for a long time. Then she asks, "Mister, have you ever been lost?" You reply, "I only knew I was lost after I tried to draw a map for someone else." She gives a very small laugh. "Me too." Then she opens her backpack. Inside are countless small pieces of paper, each with a story fragment written on it. No beginning, no end, no reader. She pulls out a piece and hands it to you. A bird once flew against the wind for 7 seasons, just to return to its old branch. But when it returned, the branch had fallen and it didn't recognize it. It still sang the old song, and the wind still blew. You read it and are silent. The girl asks, "Is it okay?" You say, "No one could write that if they hadn't done it." That night, the two of you sit side by side. No fire, no food, just dust and stars. You tell a piece of a story you had forgotten you remembered. The girl doesn't ask questions, she just listens. You feel that the thing you had tried to do your whole life finds someone to listen without demanding anything has happened. Not with ceremony, not with suspense. It just happened. The next morning, the girl leaves first, without saying goodbye. You don't need it. You know the story you told wasn't for her to remember your name, but for her to know that she could continue. You walk alone through the dusty desert and see an old guard post. Carved on the wooden door are the words, "Only those who no longer need to go are allowed to move on." You hesitate, then you knock. The door opens. No one is inside. Just a desk, a chair, a pen, and a blank scroll of paper. You understand. This isn't a place to continue telling, but to record. You sit down, you write, not for others, not for posterity, only because if you don't write it down, the memory will be lost. You write, "I once survived on a piece of moldy bread. I once hated someone so much that every time I told their story, I hurt myself. I once saved someone by letting them believe I was weak. When you look up, it's dark. You leave the guard post, not taking the paper with you, leaving it for someone else one day to be able to walk in, read, and know they are not alone in their imperfection. You continue to walk, but no longer as a storyteller. Now you are one who holds a fire in the palm of your hand, not for anyone to see, not needing anyone to look. A small fire, enough to warm yourself, not big enough for others to gather around. You choose this, not to withdraw from the world, but because the world is crowded enough. You just need peace. On that final night, you sleep amidst low, grassy hills. In a dream, you meet everything you've ever told. The person swept away by the wind, the fish that sang with memory, the wall that knew how to listen, the thief who stole others' dreams, the child who waited forever for an apology that never came. They all stand in a circle around you, saying nothing, just smiling. You ask, "Why are you all still here?" One replies, "Because no one ever told this part." You ask, "Is this the end?" Another shakes their head. Number. This is the part where you no longer need to know what happens next. You nod. Then you open your eyes. No one, no dust, no sky, just a white space, no time, no direction, and a very distant call from somewhere ahead. Are you ready to live without needing to tell? You don't answer. You just walk toward the voice with the lightness of someone who was once heavy. You stand before the horizon. There is nothing there. No mountains, no forests, no sound, just a pale ground stretching on forever, waiting for you to cross. You don't ask what it is. You don't need to know. You just know this is a place you must pass through alone. Not to tell anymore, but to not need to tell at all. You take a step. The first feeling is lightness, not because the backpack is gone, but because for the first time you are not carrying your story like a bag of rocks, afraid to drop it. You let it fall if it wants to. You let yourself no longer be in control. You walk past figures that were once familiar faces. No one waves. No one holds you back. Someone who was once a close friend is now a shadow walking in the opposite direction. Someone who once made you cry stands still, like a column of smoke that has already dissipated. You walk past them with no regrets, just silently thinking, "I carry you with me, even when you don't know it. Now, I leave you here. No anger, no waiting." Further on, You see a narrow wooden bridge spanning a chasm. On the sign at the head of the bridge, a line is carved deep. Only untold stories are allowed to pass. You don't stop. You understand. You are the untold story. Not because you have more to say, but because you have learned how not to. You step onto the bridge. The wind rises. You think it will knock you down, like all the times before. But this time you don't fight it. You let the wind blow through you. You are not empty. The wind passes through you as if you are a part of it. When you reach the other side, the sky turns a strange color. Not light, not dark, but a soft glow, like eyelids just before sleep. You sit down. For the first time in your life, not to rest, but to be still. You look into the distance and see a group of people sitting in a circle. They don't see you. They are listening to someone speak. You know that voice. It's the little girl from long ago. She's telling a story about a man who walked through the West, met spirits in the dust, and found himself in the silence. You smile. Your story has left you. It's no longer yours. It has become part of the flow. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to let go. In your final dream, you return to the beginning. The moment you knocked on the first door where you once begged to stay, begged to tell, begged for someone to care. Back then, no one opened it. But now you open the door from the inside. The space is empty, but you see a piece of paper fall from the ceiling. You pick it up. On it is the last line you need to know. You have told enough to listen, and you have listened enough to live. You open your real eyes. No more West, no more sand, no more story. Just you, where you are, lying in the real world with a phone in your hand, your eyes at the threshold of sleep. You realize your life doesn't need to be as grand as a script. You don't always have to survive in a dramatic fashion. You just need to be honest, and that is enough. Let your eyes close. No need to rush. Let each told word recede into the background. No need to remember the entire journey. Just hold on to one feeling, that you have lived, you have seen, you have heard, and you have touched something very real. If there is dust in your heart, let it settle. If there is an untold story, trust that it is in no hurry. You have many more nights, many more mornings, many more people who will listen or not. But you are still you, and that is still beautiful. Now, let yourself dissolve into the night. No one is asking you anything. You don't need to prove anything. You don't need to start over. You just need to sleep. Sleep like someone who has survived, not by strength, but by a rare softness. Sleep like a storyteller who has learned that silence is the final story. Good night.